Don Williams, welcome back.
Erica, I am so thrilled to be back. Our conversations that we've had in the past have been make me think too. But we've gotten a lot of comments, you and I, about people feel like it's helped them. Just the whole idea.
I hope so. I've definitely seen some great feedback, and that's why I want to keep having you on, just because you provide such great insights and a detailed approach into the recruiting process. And I'm excited for today's because it's really targeted to the parents and the role that they play in their child's recruiting process. So we'll get into that soon, but I just want to catch up with you and you just to let everyone know what you're up to right now. I know we're about to enter the summer. What's going on in Don's life? Let's get to know Don a little bit.
Uh, Look, I love working, Erica. So when people ask me what I'm up to, where I'm going, whatever, it usually revolves around work. My poor wife. But I like working. I like working no matter what I do, especially in soccer. It's been my whole life, my whole world for a long time, other than my family. So my wife and I we've got two new grandkids. We'll probably take some time, go to Idaho and see one of them, and he's turning 5, but the two new one's in San Francisco, one's in Oregon. So we'll make a couple of trips, and knowing me, I'll probably make some kind of a soccer trip out of it too. Uh, but in the world of recruiting and placement, it's an interesting time of the year. Look, most of the 2023s of girls are wrapped up. There's coaches madly scrambling all around the country at every level, trying to. I didn't know this school. I had one the other day, Division 1 school. I've got a full ride for a goalkeeper. If you can find one that could start for me, Don. Walked into the office and said that she's taking off. She's not going to come back next year. But another coach told me that their center back has gotten picked up to play professionally, and so won't be coming back to school. And so now the coach is scrambling for a center back. So there's onesies, twosies needs on the girls' side, and then the boys' side, it's manic all the way up until can be August. The men's side is a little more scrambly and late than the women's side. I think a lot of it has to do with pro academies releasing players. That's going on all around the world. And then we don't really know the effect of what the NCAA has done with uh, having the portal have two different transfer periods. So most people don't know. I don't know, Erica, but the NCAA had made a rule last year that the day after the tournament selection committee, which players can vote, and obviously there's two different dates for the men's and the women, that's selection meetings. And then there's we'll call it dead period. Well, players can still enter the portal, but if they enter during that dead period, which goes from the end of that first 30-day period until May 1st, anybody who enters in that window will have to sit out a year if they're going to continue to play NCAA Division 1, Division 2 soccer, or Division 1 soccer, and or if they enter during that May 1st through 15th period, then they're eligible. But then after May 15th, that 1 year waiting period to play Division 1 soccer from Division 1 to Division 1 closes. So we did see the portal jump. We saw it jump about 700 on the women's side and about 400 on the men's side in one day. And those are the latest numbers I have as of May 1st. So it does affect, and we did talk to college coaches all over the country that said they were going to wait to spend their final bit of money until they saw who was in that portal in the new window to see if they wanted to pick somebody up out of it. So it's been a bit manic. It's been a little bit crazy for us, trying to wrap up our 23s, and we're well into what's going on with 24s now.
It sounds like a lot of craziness and uncertainty, but hey, never a dull moment in the recruiting space. And that just gave me an idea. Maybe we can do our next recording on the transfer portal and navigating being a transfer. So I will file that one away and maybe that
Okay.
can be a future episode. But let's get into how the parents can help their soccer player navigate the recruiting process. And I know my mom initially helped me with some of the basic things like writing a good email and checking over those and helping me to narrow down my list and just talk things through and have deeper conversations instead of making a quick decision. So she definitely played just a beautiful role in my process. So let's first start with how parents can help when players are starting the process and going through it.
Yeah, I feel first of all that sounds healthy to me. That type of a role sounds healthy to me. I tell you, as a parent whose son ended up playing Division 1 soccer and played over in Europe, we had a conversation that uh, I said that if this is important to you, these are the things that you will do, and these are the things I am not doing for you. And one of them was film. I said, your mother recorded the games. You've got the games. I've showed you how to use the machine. You've watched me. At one point, I had been coaching pros. So he watched me transfer, film, start, stop. We had a setup of multiple VCRs set up where you could record on one and play on the other. And I said, if this is important to you, you'll do it. I am not doing your film for you. I'll go over it with you. I'll tell you what I think of it. And I'll tell you how to fix it. But I'm not doing this for you. It's not that important to me. Frankly, I'd prefer you not even play. I don't care. Whether you play or don't doesn't affect my life, was my attitude towards my child. And not that that attitude's got to be right, but I think there has to be a delineation between a parent advising their child and doing things and running that child's life for them. And I think that's the second is the dangerous piece that doesn't really prepare our children for what's going to happen, as I call it, when the real world kicks them in the butt and they've got to go to work and fend for themselves and experience adversity for themselves. And I didn't want 22, 23 years old to be the first time my child was going to have to navigate their own life. I wanted to prepare them as I felt that they were ready for it, right? So, fine line between helping, advising, using your adult worldly wisdom to guide your kid and doing things for them, which is I'm not in favor.
So, what are some of the initial things parents can help with and then kind of back off on?
I think they're trying. I think parents first of all need to research with their children the realities of college soccer, which is why we do all these podcasts. Right? At what age should I start? When should we start worrying about it? Is there a point when we should panic? I don't want to get my kid into a panic situation. Should we be going to camps? What age should we be going to camps? What should we be expecting out of camps? All of that is a research project. So if a parent has decided and that child's decided we're going to DIY, right? Do it yourself, then means you got to go to work. And it means that work probably should start researching freshman year, sophomore year in high school. As soon as you realize that your kid is not going to give up on this sport, that this sport is that your sport, whatever the sport is, by the way, Erica, just soccer. But as soon as you realize that that sport is going to be a major part of your child's life and they do not want to give it up and it's taking priorities over other things in their life, then you know your kid is serious. And I always tell parents, wait till that puberty kicks in. Wait till they get into high school, start dating, quite often start driving because a car and that freedom that comes with it changes what that kid can do. No longer are they restricted to X number of city blocks, but now there's no restriction and they can, still meet curfews and be back home and but have gone, miles and miles away into another situation. And that introduces them into something new in their life and they start creating new interests. So once the kids have gotten over that part and the parents know they're serious, now it's time to do the research. So we've got to dig into the timing of it and what it's going to take. And we've got a lot of podcasts, yours and mine, that we've done together, pinned in our Facebook groups so parents can kind of go through the myths of college soccer, ID camps, all of the items that you and I have discussed. They can see them all in one library on our Facebook page. And I would say that research project is step one.
All those episodes Don just mentioned, I will link in the caption below. So check those out. Don, you bring up a good point is the research part. And I think picking the right list of schools is where a parent can really help too, because every kid has these amazing dreams of going to certain schools. And sometimes it is the parent's job to step in and be like, hey, let's be realistic about this financially, academically, your soccer ability. But do you find parents getting real with their kid or beating around the bush and being like, oh, well, we'll just chase these schools that my kid wants to go to, but I don't know if they can make it?
So you get this variety and range. I've seen parents that are viciously honest with their kids. Maybe they played sports in college and they know what their kids' abilities are. They know what the kids' drive is, and they know their strengths and weaknesses. But look, I encourage every parent and every child to sit down right fairly at the beginning and create a series of tick boxes of what's important to them. Okay. If I end up going to Johns Hopkins, then and I forego the opportunity to play at maybe North Carolina, that's an educational decision in my mind. You've made a specific educational decision that Johns Hopkins is going to provide me with the education that I want and need in order to go on. So that kid is probably making education maybe even slightly above soccer, or at least even with soccer, but saying it's extremely important. I always say, as compared to my son, and I don't know if he listens to all these podcasts or not, but he's admitted it in his own podcast with me that we did together. That he had, I think, he had a sub 3.0 GPA or just under that, and he told me because that's the grades that I needed to get into the schools I wanted to get into to play soccer. And the kid's a college soccer coach 15 something years later uh, after graduating college. All he ever really wanted to do was soccer. That's a different attitude. And the priorities of his life was soccer, understanding I need an education if I'm ever coaching college, but the education piece wasn't the primary driver. For other families, there's financial implications, right? It's great to have, like we did. We had Bobby Clark at Notre Dame tried to recruit my son, and the conversation came down to I have four goalkeepers. I have no money for a goalkeeper. Well, with his grades, Bobby, what does that mean? He said 56,000. I turned to my son and said, that's not happening. Money mattered. There was a budget, and we had to stick within that budget. So that could be a priority. And as I discussed with one of my clients last night and their family, we're talking about creating this list of what's important and what are the non-negotiables. These certain things are a complete and total non-negotiable and a non-starter, right? And for some kids, it might be living on Long Island in New York City because they're from rural America and they've never experienced life in a big city. And the parent knows their kid well enough to say that it's probably going to be overwhelming, okay, to be in New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco, some middle of some big city that their kids never experienced before. And emotionally, this is where parents come in. You know your kid better than anybody on planet Earth. You've spent, as a parent, more hours with that child watching them grow up than anybody else on planet Earth. And so you have to know your kid and help them. Plato that said it, know yourself, know thyself. You have to have them and help them know who they are and what's important to them. And until that happens, it's a big, giant waste of time because you end up chasing names and labels, you know, chasing Versace, like that changes your life, chasing Coach, like that changes your life, owning a mansion in Beverly Hills. Everybody knows the name Beverly Hills. It's exciting, it's a big name, but it's not going to change your life. being part of these things. And parents, you're shopping for a school, and I say no parent wants to pay, Lamborghini prices for a Volkswagen education, a common education that you can get. And it's not a knock on Volkswagen. I drove a Volkswagen. I owned a Volkswagen. It was great. I could beat the crud out of that car, and it went and went and went. But let's face it, it's far more common of a car on the road than a Testarossa is. Okay, so nobody wants to just get something common and then pay top dollar for it, unless it's for pure ego, which is fine too. If you want to live your life by pure ego and status symbols and all that, I'm not going to make a judgment on you. There's lots of people in the world that are doing it. But most parents understand dollar value, educational value. And yes, there is a difference when you have on your resume Johns Hopkins or Brown or Princeton or Harvard or Stanford when you're entering certain professions. Not all. I'm not sure that an elementary school really cares that you got your degree from Harvard versus Cal State East Bay. That principal probably doesn't really care unless it's for their ego that say, we have a Harvard teacher on staff, look at us. But other than that, there's no indication that that Harvard teacher is going to be any better than that teacher at Cal State East Bay. But in the business world or in certain world of technology and certain worlds of medical field and things like that, it can make a difference where you end up at certain schools. But just know that those prestigious schools that have low entry rates, low acceptance rates, are probably going to be more expensive because you have a rarer commodity.
Shout out to Volkswagen, not a bad car at all.
Nothing wrong with a Volkswagen.
Nothing wrong
Nothing
with
wrong.
it. But no, you make a good point, and I do think that research piece initially is so key for parents, and if they go about it in a good way and they find great resources, then they can navigate the process pretty efficiently. But one question I get a lot from parents, and I've gotten it a lot recently, is when should I work with a college recruiting company? Because sometimes they doubt themselves and they don't know if they're being realistic about it or if they need to outsource and get some professional help. When should parents potentially work with a college soccer recruiting company?
Uh, so I'm going to make this really clear because I've been accused by all kinds of things on social media. Don't need us. Don't need anybody like us. You can do this all yourself. I made a put. All we have in this life is time, energy, effort, and then money that can buy those other things, somebody else to do those other things for us. We are going to spend something to get something done. So if I want to save money, then I spend my own time, effort, and energy. If I want to give up some of that money, I can have somebody else expend some time, effort, and energy. If I want to pay even more money, then I can have people do a lot of things which will save me time, effort, and energy so that I can focus on other things. If my kid doesn't want, if my kid complains that, look, when am I supposed to do my film? When am I supposed to do the college reach out? That you see my schedule. I'm overscheduled as it is, which seems to be something we have in our society that you and I both I think kind of have a problem with is this overscheduling. But if we find ourselves in that situation where we need to expend a little bit of money and then get back some of that time, effort, and energy by spending that money, then we need to do it, right? I I I how I've put in my own lawn before. I've done it. I've taken off my own roof before in a house. I've done it. Um, I've got somebody coming over to give me a bid to put in a lawn for me. I can do it. I put in the sprinkler system myself. I can finish this project. I am finding myself short of time, effort, and energy. So I'm going to give up some money now to pay somebody else to expend their time, effort, and energy to get this lawn project done after it's been sitting there for a year and a half. Tired of looking at it, ready to spend the money. Uh, at that point, you may want to reach out and see what you can give for you. And it may be bits and pieces, by the way. It may not be employing or hiring a company like us to do everything for you up to the point where you have to take over as a player when it comes to talking to college coaches, parents. You have to step in when it comes to talking about the finances. I can't do that stuff for you. I can only prepare the player and their package and make it attractive and then introduce that package, that player to college coaches that I believe are the right fit for that player's profile. That's the piece that we can do. But then there are other companies out there will just do your video for you, right? And we actually have a side company where we just do video. That's all we do in that piece. And there's some advice, there's some, of course, there's feedback coming out of it, right? In other words, you're a center back and there's not a single header of you, a single clip of you doing a header, right? Or making a hard slide tackle. That's coaches need to see that bit from a center back. They need to see it. And if there's none of that, then we're going to be able to at least give that type of advice out of the video service. So you can farm out bits and pieces of it, or you can say, look, I'm just going to hire somebody to do this for me. Then you've got to, now there are companies out there, there are people out there, services out there will take anybody. So that's fine. You can just sign up for them. And then we're invitation only. So parents are going to have to figure out what segment of the marketplace they want to dip into and pay someone to hire themselves out. I'll just say, just do your research and maybe ask a few parents, a few people you trust before you spend your hard-earned money. And if you're doing video, see their product beforehand. See some samples beforehand. No different than shopping for anything else.
That was a nice little lesson on business and economics. And of course, everything comes at a cost, and that's going to be highly individual on what parents want to afford or save. And I've actually seen this situation a couple of times. Parents will not sign up with a college recruiting company and they're like, we'll just do it ourselves. We'll put our time into it and we'll save more in the end. But actually, in the end, they end up spending thousands more than what they would have paid for the recruiting company because they were chasing all these ID camps and traveling across the country to schools that weren't a fit when the company could have assessed them and told them, hey, you should go to these, save your money, they'll want you. And I've seen that situation many times where in the end, way more money was spent chasing the wrong schools.
I'm glad you brought it up and not me. And by the way, Erica and I do not work together financially. We don't have a connection financially. There's nothing, no reason for her to say any of these things.
No kickbacks,
Uh,
nothing. We just hop on podcasts
no,
and talk.
we're just trying to help. But that's exactly right. I had a girl from Canada who was going to go to the Yale camp. It was going to be mom and dad traveling. They were going to make a weekend of it, the whole thing, going to visit the campus and the town, all that. And they were coming from Canada, a little long ways away. It would have been a $2,000 trip. We were able to get on the phone, call Yale. Do you need a goalkeeper for this year? The answer was no. We just signed a girl. Get back to the family, say, don't go to the camp. They've already got their goalkeeper. You're wasting your time. They save themselves our fee plus just not going to camps. So it's more than just, I think if this is done right, it's more than just exposure. I just almost don't like that word exposure, at least the way it's being used. Get exposure, get exposure, get exposure to who, why, when, where is the important, ask the questions. Why am I doing this? What are the odds? What am I trying to do here? I always liken it to like movie stars. And if anybody's old enough to in our audience to remember the story about, I think it's Lana Turner and Schwab's drugstore, where she came to California, was sitting in Schwab's drugstore. Somebody saw her, said, "You're gorgeous. You should be in movies." They put her in movies. She got discovered. And I often feel like that's the approach that parents are taking with ID camps. If you just Google it, I don't even know what will come up, but I bet a big number comes up. How many players attended the Stanford camp last year? It goes into the literally the thousands. 1,000, 2,000, something like that. And so you're showing up with these masses, and if you don't stand out, you don't get noticed and picked up. Then why are you there? If you're there for the learning, if they're teaching you new things about soccer, if they're teaching you about the college recruiting space, if you're learning something, if there's a value to it, your family was going to be in California anyways, and you thought, well, this will be fun to make part of our vacation, going to the Stanford camp for the week or whatever. If there's a reason for it that has nothing to do with necessarily trying to be discovered, probably if that's where you want to spend your money, nothing wrong with that. Spend your money how you want to spend your money. Have let your kid experience whatever you want your kid to experience. But to go into it with the idea that I'm spending this money as an investment to get my kid discovered amongst these thousands and thousands, and be honest, if your kid doesn't, your kid's not the best kid on their team. Wait, I see teams of 3, 4, 5 players going to the Stanford camp. I see whole teams going to the Stanford camp. We're all going to get discovered at the Stanford, as if Stanford was going to pick up 15 players from one team. It's never going to happen. It's not how it works. It's not reality. I mean, no part of that has a basis in the reality of how the economics and a scarcity model and how this works in the world or anything that I know of.
There's always a cost benefit analysis, and everyone needs to be really diligent about that. And I love that story you just said about the girl potentially going to the Yale camp. And I think any parent listening would be like, dang, I wish someone would save me from spending 2K. And I think those are some important questions parents can ask before they go to camps. Well, does my kid do they need my kid's position? Do they meet the academic requirements? And just so many questions instead of just going for the sake of exposure when they probably don't even need you. Are there any other questions before choosing an ID camp parents should be asking?
Well, number one is, can my kid play at this level? Which means that you and your child have watched multiple games at that level, preferably in person. There's something about I'm a Warriors fan, been watching the NBA playoffs here going on. I watch these guys play. And by the way, on television, LeBron doesn't look that big on television. It all doesn't look that fast on television. I've been to Warriors games in person, and I've stood on the floor and watched them warm up. It's like, holy smokes, are these guys athletic? This is scary that somebody of LeBron's size and strength should be able to move like he does, or Kevon Looney, or some of these guys that are just absolute physical phenomenons, uh, freaks of nature almost, that somebody that big, that heavy, that strong should move that fast is mind blowing to me. You can only appreciate that in person. You can't really appreciate that on film. And we're streaming on our computers and we're watching games, and it's great, but you need to see the product. And then you need to be honest and say, am I that fast? Am I that strong? Or how many years do I think I'm away from being that fast and that strong if I'm on pace? If somebody like Erica Sutter tells me, look, you're on pace with some at this age to be able to keep up with anybody in the country. You're on pace. It doesn't mean you can stop working because you're not there yet. How many years am I away from that, Erica? I don't know, hard to tell, but probably 2 or 3 years. You may not hit your peak until whatever. Knowing that that means you're probably sitting the bench till whenever. Now, there's another one of our tick boxes. What's important to me? Is it important to play and be a starter immediately? Is it important for me to be coming off the bench immediately? Is it important for me to be at least traveling with the team immediately to make the travel squad? And then you'd go right down the list. Or am I willing to sacrifice a girl that went to Colorado? Her name's Kellis Johnson. Her story's not really a secret. She coaches at Dominican University in California. And she wanted to be at Colorado no matter what. She wanted to be a Buffalo no matter what. That's what she wanted. She was going to go to school there with or without soccer. So fortunately, I was able to call Bill Hempen, and Bill was the coach there at the time, and she was his fourth string goalkeeper and always was. but she was at her dream school. So for the most part, she was happy with it. She accepted her role within the team. By the way, that's okay too, if that's what your kid is suited for and wants. My son, myself, would have crushed us both to know that we were never going to play. And frankly, me crushed me a game that I didn't play in. I had to play. I had to play. I was fortunate enough to never sit the bench in my life. But that's only because I was wise with my choices. I knew that I knew that if I went to certain levels, I was not going to play. I could watch them play and go, I can't do what that person does. And when it got to a certain point in my career where I looked over and said, yeah, that guy's really good, better than me, then it was time for me to step out of that situation. I'm not saying for players just to give up and quit, but you can see at a certain point when you've been working, you and I talked about this in the podcast, you can work your butt off and do everything you're supposed to do. You can get all the right sleep, you can get all the right nutrition, you can do all the right workouts, you can work your butt off, you can join all the right teams, you can do everything perfect in managing your career, work on all your mentality, and you get to a certain point where you look over and you go, yeah, that guy's good. That guy's good. I've worked so hard for so long, and I can see I'm getting to the point where I'm peaking. I'm peaking. And I'm not even remotely close to keeping up with that guy, right? I could have worked out every single day of my life, and I'll never beat LeBron James in basketball, ever. At what point do you help your kid as a parent accept that reality? Got to be very open minded and not blinded by your love for your child so much that you can't see what is really happening in front of you, which does happen with parents. And it's easy to have happen. And it's easy for coaches, by the way, club coaches, to love their kids so much and get so attached to that kid that you can't see the weaknesses of that player. Almost every coach I ever talked to, whether I was coaching in junior college and trying to move a kid on, or whether it was a 4-year school and the kid wasn't a fit for our program and another coach was calling me about the player, or whether it's this job now, we'll ask, so what are the player's weaknesses? What do they need to work on? And if you don't have any weaknesses as an answer, they know that something's up. It puts up their antenna, which is why they ask that question, right? So knowing what our kids' weaknesses are, and players especially knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, and knowing where you fit and having that priority checklist.
I think you made such a good point about knowing where you fit and actually going to these games in person and seeing the level and the athleticism and even just the size. I think when we watch UNC play UCLA women on TV, everyone looks like specs. But if you go to the game, a lot of these girls are over 6 foot. They're super muscular, they're powerful, they're athletic, and it's just different in person. I was even surprised how many people didn't even tune into that game on TV. How many female soccer players were like, "Wait, who won the national title?" And I was like, "It was the craziest game ever." Like, you didn't see this, but they watch women's soccer every 4 years when the World Cup comes around, and that's not enough. Especially if you want to play in college, you need to know where you stand and get familiar with the level. So I think that is such valuable advice, and also bringing the genetics into the picture. And yes, your player can work really hard, but genetics do play a role, and that's not talked about a lot in the performance world, but we do have to be real with it, and as parents as well. Is there anything else you want to add? I think we touched on some good ones as far as how parents can help. Do you want to move on to how they kind of sabotage the process?
Yeah, I'm going to give one quick suggestion. Yeah, let's do that. One quick suggestion that just came to my mind: go watch spring games. Go watch your dream. Watch North Carolina play a spring season game against a maybe lower level opponent, and or early in North Carolina is not a great example. Uh, but the school you want to go to, watch them play preseason matches, like the first couple of scrimmages that aren't even, the scores aren't even. You're going to see this lopsided. You're going to see two Division One teams playing against each other. One is up here and one is down here. So That's why I always hate it. Can't it bristles me every time that somebody says you can play Division One soccer or you should play Division One, as if it's all the same. What is wrong with us that we cannot see that the NFL is different than the Canadian Football League, that the quality of play is different, the types of players are different, that there's a reason why somebody's playing in the CBA and not the NBA. There's a reason that somebody is in AAA, not Major League Baseball. There's a reason. And we've got to see those differences because it's all professional. Look, I'm playing professional baseball. You're getting paid $1,200 a month, and then company housing is taking back $800 a month, and you're netting $400 a month playing in AAA. How is that a living? How is that professional? You can't even buy your own food for $400 a month. So you're spending money to play AAA baseball. And this is professional. But we talk about like all professionals the same, or all Division One is the same, or all Division Two is the same. Stop. My advice to just stop with the labels. Stop it. Figure out where you fit. Figure out where you fit. And then step back and go, these are the different brands and labels in which under I fit.
Brilliant. I'm really glad you added that one. Let's move on to how parents sabotage the recruiting process. Now, this isn't going to be a knock on parents. It's purely educational because I think a lot of them are trying to help. They want to get involved, but they don't realize that some of the things they're doing are hindering their child's chance of playing at the school they want to go to. So,
Yeah.
what are some ways parents sabotage the process without even knowing?
Look, we all love our children very, very much. They are arguably some of the most important pieces of our lives forever. And it's really important to us as parents that our kids, uh, are happy and successful in life. So, okay, parents, I'm with you. I'm a parent myself. I love that you and I are having discussion because you don't have kids yet, and but you're looking at this very objectively. Then it takes that emotional piece out of it for you. I can't completely let that emotional piece go because I'm always thinking back to what did I actually do with my kids. So just want to state that thank you, parents, for driving your kids and helping your kids. This isn't a slam on you, but what some of the things that we see I just had a discussion with somebody, Erica. You can probably find it in our Facebook group. I had made a post a while ago about I saw and actually got a message from a kid, a DM, and it clearly wasn't from a kid. And I went and looked at their account, and they're 11 years old. And I thought, this isn't an 11-year-old. This is not an 11-year-old. Clearly not an 11. Nothing about this screams 11-year-old. It screams adult running an account for an 11-year-old and not only posting as their child, this week we played. I was so excited to play. I was so excited to go train with. It's in the first person. And then they actually DM'd me as that kid. And I made a post that parents, please don't run your kids' accounts as your kid. If you, as a parent, decide that it is appropriate for your child to have a social media account because they're of a certain age, please monitor that account. Please make sure that it is open and closed to the right and the wrong people. Please make sure that it's all appropriate content. Please make sure that the content is not harming your child's opportunity to move on to the next level. Please monitor. Please be involved. I don't mind you. I want you involved. I'm begging you to be involved, but I'm also begging you don't pretend you are them. So that whole idea is a big red flag of somebody pretending to be their child. If I'm a coach, that kid, I'm just going to put that kid aside because it's clear that this is more important to the parent than it is to your kid. And it really comes back to as an adult, how are we going to raise and help raise and be part of the village that raises our generation, our next generations? And I always told my players, and I felt this way as a parent, and you heard me talk about, give a good example of how I felt this with my son. If this is more important than me than it is to you, we have a problem. I want this to be child driven. I want the kids to be leading us the direction they want to go as far as if they even want to play at the next level. Because as parents, we our kids hear things and understand things that we as adults sometimes don't think they hear and understand. They do. And if even a joke that, well, at least you'll be able to pay me back with tuition when you get that big scholarship for all this travel. Ha ha ha. Let's laugh and joke about it. It sinks in, and kids remember it, and it bothers me to even if your kid even hears, or it's going to get back to your kids. But I hear parents having conversations on sidelines at games with other parents about this concept that going to get a scholarship here, going to get a scholarship there. This will pay for that. This will pay for that. This will all be worth it. It's an investment. And then parents saying, why would I invest in my child if I wasn't expecting them to go D1? They could have just walked on to their local junior college. They could have just walked on to their local NAIA. They could have just walked on to their local D3. They could have just whatever. All this investment is for my kid to go and play D1 soccer, which ignores that whole other checklist that we talked about, right? And we're just clear. Those are red flags. So allowing your children to guide this process of if they even want to play or not. We have this phenomenon that I see happening, and I don't have any stats, and I'm not a mental health expert, but I wonder how much pressure that adults are putting onto the kids gets transferred to them, that they carry, that they own as baggage, and it weighs them down because they are trying to meet somebody else's expectations of what they should be and what they should do. That should never happen. That should never happen uh, to children, for sure. As adults, that's when the real world kicks us in the butt. Our boss is going to have expectations of us. And if we don't meet those expectations, we'll be looking for a new job, right? But that attitude, that adult attitude, doesn't need to be transferred to kids.
I'm trying to wrestle with this as well, but with the parent run accounts of these really young kids, are parents doing it because they think it's going to increase their chances of exposure? And does it even increase chance of exposure? Or can the kid just focus on being a good soccer player, developing, parents spending more time with kid instead of on social media and actually focusing on the things that truly matter instead of wasting time making these highlight reels of 10-year-olds?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
At least I'm
that,
asking the question.
I've had parents say that we use these social media accounts and these posts as a way to as a photo album, so that our kids can look back at and see, fine, hey, I thought that was legit. I thought it was pretty. Probably other ways to keep a photo album, but by the way, besides seeing let all of the public see our kids, like if you really want to keep that keepsake as a keepsake, I've got photo albums of my kids. I've got videos of my kids. None of them are posted publicly, but I still have them. So I'm not sure I quite buy that argument, but okay. Let's say that that's exactly the intent and how this is going to work. And frankly, they want to share with grandma and share with uncle and all that. That's fine. Social media that's what is kind of invented originally as a way to touch base and keep touch. Uh, that's one thing. That's one thing. But the promotion and the tagging of coaches and the and going to be the next this and on their way to Barcelona and all this, yeah, the when we see, and I can understand where this comes from, when we see how famous Greta Thunberg became, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, Thunberg, how famous she became as a child, and other parents want this fame for their children, uh, and they're trying to do. I That's the part that I am having a hard time getting a hold of. It doesn't need okay. Social media can help. Can help. I've changed my mind on this, by the way. If you hear what I said 2 years ago, I think about this and I observe, and it can help to an extent. but it's really an impersonal way to reach out to coaches. It's a very generalized, smashing to everybody in the world, impersonal way to reach out to somebody. If you have a product and you're advertising it on television to millions of people and the internet, and you're buying all of this, am I more likely to buy into that product simply by all of that advertising that I'm hit with? Or if my dad uses the product and says, look, I've been using this for years. You've got to use this product. I'm going to go pick up that product. Or my best buddy who's a, you know, car guy and he's got this new wax or something and he says, you've got to try this. Unbelievable, never try anything like it. I'll go out and buy it more likely as the referral and the recommendation of somebody I trust than I will from the mass advertise. You're just trying to throw a bunch of everything against the wall and see what sticks, which is often how social media is used by kids, as indicated by you and I and schools and everybody being tagged as a group. It's like, who are you talking to? Are you talking to me? Are you talking to them? What do you want from them? Why are you tagging them? Why are you tag? I always often wonder. It's like there's a group on Twitter that hates me, and they tag me and him in the same post. I wonder what they're thinking. What are they thinking? You know, what is that person thinking? What's the other person thinking? Who are you targeting? What is happening? I don't, I don't, I don't know what message that sends. I don't think it's a great message that it sends. You tag 17 coaches, 20 schools, the same 5, 6 schools, and you're tagging them, tagging, tagging. It's like, me as a coach, do you really want to come to my school or do you just want to go to a school?
So would you say social media is just you can use it and it's more of the icing on the cake?
I think it's just part of the process. Look, I think we often say as a company that it's not us doing the work. It's you as a kid doing all the work. You just need somebody to guide you and help you and help put you the right direction. That's part of the village. It's part of the process. It's part of your team. Using social media as a tool that you use as part of your team can be helpful, but I am pretty sure that Jeremy Gunn at Stanford isn't perusing social media to try to find his next player that is going to make a difference and an impact in his team. And I'm pretty sure that none of his coaches are either.
I know Johns
So,
Hopkins isn't.
yeah, it's not their focus. It's not what
They're
they're looking
so
for.
busy. They get, I think the assistant coach at Johns Hopkins was saying he gets over 1,000 emails within just a few days' time. So he has other things to tend to than get on social media and be tagged in 100 posts.
Yeah, and I think that there are programs in the country. I coached one of them where if I had been on social media today, I would be looking for players on it. I live in a junior college, town of 5,000, Nowhereville, mountains of California, next big town 2 hours away. Not much to do here. Nobody's ever heard of our school. Kids aren't clamoring to come to our school. I've got to go do the work to sell my program. Yeah, I'd be using social media and I'd be encouraging as many kids as possible to also use social media, hoping that at this time of year, May, June, when I haven't filled my team yet, like hundreds of coaches around the country haven't filled their teams yet, uh, then I'm going to turn over every single rock I can. And I'm going to encourage as many kids as possible to tag me, post stuff, and I'm going to reach out to as many of them as I can. Two of those coaches that I know that coach those types of programs and I had a conversation on social media and in DMs yesterday. And the coaches were complaining that these kids are saying they don't have homes and then they won't even return the messages back to those coaches. They won't return a message. They won't coach reaches out saying, saw your stuff, saw you're looking for a school, and then it's crickets, nothing. And they admitted to me privately that they completely understand that yes, those kids need a home, but I'm not coming to your school. Your small school in the middle of nowhere, like I coached in California at this junior college, is not something I've been looking for, dreaming about, or wanting. And I just not going to answer you, coach. Not interested. That happens. True stories.
I really appreciate you diving deeper into this. And that's why I like having these conversations. And I just want to reiterate to people it's okay to change your mind on a topic or present some nuances. And I'm glad we got into that with the social media discussion. But I want parents to realize that it's not the only way to do it. And I think what we discussed earlier in the episode about really researching and taking the time to find the right fit, make the reach out process to coaches super personal because you want to play at their school and you've researched their school in depth. I think that's so powerful. And also, Don, to your point, if the product's good, you're going to get found, right? And I don't think people like that impersonal touch to things. And I was just thinking, even your own dentist or a trainer, you don't find them on Instagram. You find them because your neighbor goes to them. And I think that's something that everyone should think about as we wrap up this discussion. Don, is there anything else you want to add or just something to close out with for the parents?
Yeah, I don't want to end this negatively. Maybe you can help me spin this positively. Uh, Coaches, college coaches are paying attention to sidelines. They're paying attention to the, don't know how else to say it, psychotic parents that are so wrapped up in their children that they can't even control what comes out of their mouth. And it's negative and it's mean. And yeah, I hear parents, talking to players on the other team as a college coach. I do not want that on my sideline. My athletic director will come up to me and say, you need to have a talk with that parent. He's not going to say, I'll have a talk with that parent for you. He's going to say, this is your kid. You recruited that kid. You recruited this family. Now they're causing a problem. Go fix it. And if you can't get a hold of your program, you can't get a hold of your parents, if these are the people you're going to be in, you will no longer be employed by this institution. And that is happening across this country. That is happening. Coaches are paying attention. Uh, I we as a staff, we are on the sidelines with these coaches. We are on the player side, away from the parents, and pretty soon you go back and see that team again, and the coach is sitting with the parents and around the parents or walking by the parents. My thing was I would sit in the corner away from everybody, and I still do this. And then if I see a player that's super exciting, I'll walk up and down the sidelines, and I can hear when a parent only yells the name of a single child and only cheers for one single child, I know that that is the parent of that child. Now I listen to the rest and the totality of what that kid says. I don't judge that parent, by the way, for just cheering for their own kid. I have no problem with that. As long as it's all positive, and as long as it's not directing and it's not coaching and it's not interfering and it's not demeaning to other players or the referee or the coaching staff. And then you listen to what goes on quietly as parents talk to other parents. Can't believe this, and why would they do that? And it's all negative. That's negativity that you're bringing into your program, and it's negativity that that child is being exposed to on a regular basis, and insight and what the values are for that family. And so, parents, you can screw this up for your kids. You can get in their way, and you should be the cart. They should be the horse. You shouldn't be the cart out in front of the horse. You shouldn't be plowing the way for your children to make it easier. There's an old saying that our job as parents is to prepare our children for the road, not to prepare the road for our children. The road will have bumps in it. It will have potholes. It will have difficult hills to climb. And it will have uncontrollable hills that we have to figure out how to navigate to go down so we don't get out of control as we go downhill. That road is we don't know what's around the next corner because this road hasn't been traveled by most parents and children before. So you have to approach each turn with caution, and you've got to be well aware of what could be around the corner and that a deer could jump out in front of you. And what are you going to do? How are you going to avoid this deer? Or are you just going to plow through it and just kill everybody and say, oh, well, I was out of my control when it's not? Uh, so I think this concept that we need to prepare the way for our children is a little misguided. I think we need to prepare our children for the way.
That's a great note to end on, and not negative at all, just tough love and something for parents to think about as they go through this process. Don, thank you so much for coming on. I will include all of the links in the caption below to our previous podcast with the topics next to them, as well as Don's social media platforms. Don, thank you again, and I will see everyone on next week's episode.